Today on Just Feudal Things, we're going to go in a little bit of a different direction. We're going to talk about Dante, whom I am mostly unfamiliar with, and we're going to talk about historical art, but not necessarily from a historical perspective as much as from the artist's perspective. As I am joined today by Eric Armusik, who is doing 40 epic paintings of Dante's Divine Comedy. Just Feudal Things is a conversational podcast about medieval history with subject matter experts and enthusiasts. You can catch the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and a new episode releases on the 3rd and 17th of each month. If you'd like to see more medieval history-related content, you can follow me on X at @MemoryMedieval. And if you'd like to join my medieval history book club, the link for the Substack will also be below in the description. Knowing basically nothing about Dante before really looking into him at all for this episode, I had assumed he was some sort of early Renaissance figure, almost like a Christopher Columbus or Leonardo da Vinci. Turns out he's solidly medieval in the 13th century. So for anyone out there who is as unfamiliar as I was, here's a quick biography of Dante. He was born in 1265 in Florence, Italy. He was a poet and writer, best known for the Divine Comedy, which we'll talk about today, an epic poem describing his journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise. He grew up in a politically turbulent Florence, where he was involved in local conflicts between rival factions. He was exiled in 1302 due to political shifts, and he never returned to his hometown. During his exile, he wrote his masterpiece, blending classical influences, Christian theology, and personal reflection. He died in 1321 in Ravenna, leaving a lasting legacy as a founder of Italian literature. And joining me today to talk about Dante and his work related to Dante is Eric Armusik. In the description, you'll find links to his work and his project on Dante, which he began in 2016. 40 large panels depicting Dante's Inferno in collaboration with Dante scholar Christopher Kleinhans. Once completed, the series will be published and exhibited in a major museum. His work is featured in numerous churches and prestigious private collections and has been recognized by the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, American Art Collector, and more. Okay, so the first question I have for you is, obviously, as somebody who's painting and you have really, even metaphorically, an open canvas, you can paint anything. How did you decide that you wanted to paint Dante and his works?
I think it came from two basic ideas. I was just graduating college, and I just come back from spending a semester in Italy. Actually spent a good amount of time in Florence, and I was very interested in reading the Divine Comedy after college. And I returned home, and my mother bought me this book, and I can't remember at this moment what the author used for the artwork, but I'm reading this incredible poem, and the artwork, the illustrations are just awful, just really modern kind of, interpretations, very abstracted and expressionist kind of art. And I thought, wow, this story is so incredible. Like, this should be the greatest illustrated story of all time. And I thought at that point, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. I'm gonna go ahead and paint this great epic series. And but I would just graduated college. I just didn't have the know-how yet. I didn't have even the skills or the ideas, the models, anything else to be able to pull off something this epic. And I thought even at the time it shouldn't be something small. It's such a big story. And then having also been in Italy, thinking about, wow, all this amazing art that I saw, the grandiose art you saw in Florence and Rome and all those other cities in Italy. And then I returned home, and everybody's, we're all doing these small paintings and stuff. And I'm thinking, where are those big commissions? Where are those huge commissions from the Renaissance, from, the Baroque eras and all those time periods? And I thought, if I can't get a commission like this at this point, I'm just going to paint one. And I decided, almost 20 years later into my career, that I was going to take this series on in 2016. And at the moment, rereading it again, I thought, wow, this is so much bigger than I am. Like, I could easily do some kind of interpretation of this huge poem. But what service would I be doing to Dante in that quest? So I decided to start looking at people, different professors, experts in the field, and I had a couple different people led me on the path to connecting with Dr. Christopher Kleinhens, who was a professor in Wisconsin, at Wisconsin Madison University, and he taught Dante and other medieval literature for about 40 years. And we connected at that moment, and I've ever since have been using him as kind of my liaison, kind of somebody to collaborate with. And I'll kind of read into each canto as I'm working on him, come up with a sketch, share it with him, and he'll give me feedback back and forth. I'll paint the painting, and I've kind of moved through this whole series. But it's been the most incredible journey of my life. I'm only 16 paintings in right now into a 40 painting series. But the paintings are all 4 foot by 5 foot. So it's an immense amount of artwork. I mean, if you take 5 feet times it by 40, that's 200 feet of artwork. I'm 60 feet into it right now. And, but I wanted it to be, if I'm going to do justice to it, it has to be something almost like entering another world. Like whenever it's going to be exhibited as a whole, I would like the artwork to populate a space, a museum so large so that you walk in there and you're literally walking through each canto and experiencing it. The pieces aren't life size; they're about maybe quarter size of people, but they're large enough where you can't deny that you're being enveloped by it. And I just thought, wow, the farther I get into this, what a journey it'll be. And it's really changed my life a lot. I took it from a very challenging point in my art career, going through a lot of economical things and everything else. And it kind of, my life kind of paralleled what Dante is going through as he starts this really kind of troubling and confusing world he enters into from the very beginning. And he changes as a result of that. And in ways I've changed the same way. So it's just a fascinating journey, and I'm not even halfway there yet. So we'll see how much farther and deeper it goes. But it's definitely something I'm really happy to share.
Yeah, 40 paintings is a massive project. And and we talked about this. I mentioned this just a little bit before we started recording, but for the audience, a big part of what I'm attempting to do with this podcast is to learn for myself. So I just want to admit to you before we get started that I'm very unfamiliar with Dante. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about just, maybe give me a rough idea about the story. Like I'm sort of familiar with okay, it's sort of his metaphysical journey through the depths of hell, or I don't know. I don't know if that's,
Right.
Maybe I'm sounding like a total idiot here, but I'm not familiar with it. So maybe you could tell me just a little bit about Dante's story that you're illustrating. And then you mentioned cantos, and I don't know what that is either. So maybe you could describe a little bit of that and how you're picking what it is that you're illustrating, because sort of same type of thing where you can pick anything. You can kind of pick anything in this book. So how are you picking out which pieces you're going to illustrate?
Sure. Just to be really, really brief, Dante is obviously in the early 1300s is exiled from Florence. He was in a political faction that was ousted at that time. With support of the Pope, and he was cast out of Florence. So he spends the rest of his life, the next 20 years or so, wandering around all of Italy and kind of disgruntled. So he starts writing this story, and his story becomes more of a spiritual story that's, kind of taking on, all of the struggles in his life through this story. And also, he encounters a girl in his youth, Beatrice, that he obviously, it's played on that it's more of a love affair, kind of, so to speak. She ends up marrying somebody else, and he ends up marrying somebody else as well. But she dies, and his heart is forever, longing for her. So through this story, he ends up kind of going through this story to meet up with her again. And this story begins with him kind of being in the middle of a wilderness, and he is led to the gates of hell. and begins his journey. So it's kind of a really great metaphorical perspective on life too. Like, he has to get to heaven to be with her, but he has to go through hell first. So he starts his journey at the mouth of hell, goes through the highest points of hell and all the way into the depths, the lowest levels, and then finds his way through to purgatory, and then to heaven from there. So he starts the Inferno. At the very beginning of the story, Beatrice, his love, sees that he is wandering and lost, and asks for Virgil, the great poet, to be his guide, because Beatrice cannot go into hell. She's pure. So she asks Virgil to assist him, because the journey is going to be very fraught with danger, and he doesn't know where he's going or anything else. So little by little, Virgil leads him through hell. Virgil is in the highest level of hell. He's considered a virtuous man from antiquity, but he did not know Jesus Christ. So he is considered, kind of in this limbo. And in this limbo is other poets as well, Ovid, Horace, I'm trying to think of a bunch of others, but all the greats are there. And so he meets all of them, and he begins his journey as kind of this, what do you want to call it? Like a Padawan kind of, he's this up and coming, great man. Virgil, great author, great, artwork, great works that he comes about in his time. But Dante, after his whole journey, ends up becoming a great person too. You usually see the crown on Virgil, seen as, all of the greats wear one. Dante, like a lot of illustrators will show that he's wearing one in there, but he's not great yet because he hasn't gone through his story. By the end of the story, he ends up being able to wear, the crown as well, the laurel crown. Virgil ends up leading him through hell. He goes into the depths of hell, comes through purgatory, and during his entry into purgatory, at a certain point, he's able to meet up with Beatrice, and then Beatrice takes him from purgatory into the Paradiso, and they go through all the levels, the high levels of righteousness at that point. So you see, in the beginning, you're seeing hell. Like Dante, in the beginning, he can't understand how some people are there. There's Paulo and Francesca, who it's a love story, so to speak, of two people that, had unrequited love, but, she was married and she went away as as an adulteress, and met up with Paulo. And so Dante in the beginning doesn't understand how, these seemingly good people are here, but then he starts to see over and over, as things get deeper and deeper into the story, there's more and more horrible people, and he also deals with his being taken out of Florence and cast out. He meets some of the people that he encountered there, the people that betrayed him, the people that were kind of two-faced. So he kind of is able to confront them and deal with them there, and and they're put in levels of hell where, the wrathful are in certain points, the murderers, the adulterers. It just has different levels as it gets deeper and deeper. And but it's a fascinating journey because he really goes through a lot in hell. It really kind of forges his mind differently. And then purgatory is generally seen, in Catholicism as a way of the spiritual, kind of burning away the bad and spiritual, kind of cleansing from there. So he goes through a number of, things that aren't as bad as what he experienced in hell. And then he ends up in the good Paradiso at this point, where he experiences all what righteousness is. So it's a very interesting trip. And for me, as I said, it has been interesting for me because I also entered this story as somebody who had a very cursory understanding, really enjoyed the Divine Comedy, but having gone through it with my liaison, Dr. Christopher Kleinhens, I've learned so much more in the perspective and, how things are kind of ordered, and, he'll give me perspectives on, what words may have meant more then than they do now. Like our reading of it is, in our modern world here is very different than what maybe certain intentions were then. And He'll take me through the history of the way certain artists approached it, whether they did it well or they didn't do it well. Um, so for me, it's a challenge to really kind of find my own voice in there, kind of, walk on the shoulders of the great people before me. But I certainly want to leave a legacy behind um, that's of a greatness, and it's a very, very, you know it's a challenging epic to take on. So I'm enjoying it very much, but I have lots to go.
Yeah, of course. And so what does a canto mean? Because you mentioned the cantos. What does
Yeah,
that
the
mean?
cantos, there's around 33, each different part of the Divine Comedy. The Inferno, the Purgatorio, and the Paradiso all are broken up by cantos. So, you start in Canto 1, Dante's in the wilderness. By the time you're in, 33, you're, meeting the devil, at the very depths. So there's this progression of each one. So for me, I decided to do 40 paintings. It's obviously more cantos, more paintings than cantos in the Inferno. So there's some that I'm doing maybe two paintings in part of the cantos. Like the one I'm dealing with right now was with Dante, sailing on the river Styx, dealing with the wrathful, and Filippo Argenti. But by the end of that canto, he's approaching the city of Dis, which is actually started that painting today. It's a wicked city with devils and demons kind of guarding the gate. So they're completely different as far as what they're seeing. You're in one part of the canto, they're traveling and experiencing one thing, and you're progressing into something else. Other times it's a little softer, so I may have skipped one canto because there's less going on, and maybe something's being handled in the previous one. So it's kind of a choice we went through a couple of years back, and just decided what works and what doesn't. Came up with a living document to talk about each one of them in depth and see what the potential was for illustration in it. But it's been very good, and I'm kind of following a chronological order at this point. I've kind of backtracked a little to, I think it was as high as Canto 14. I jumped back to Canto 8 to do painting, and then now I'm going back forward. I'm kind of filling things in, but and it's because of it's so challenging to, I've got to hire models to pose for these things. Sometimes I've got to get costumes and stuff for at least Dante and Virgil, and settings, and taking photographs and references and putting compositions together. Like it's a lot. It's like putting a movie together. So sometimes you don't quite have the materials you need for one canto, but you can easily move into the next one. The part of this is just trying not to stall out, so you could keep that progression going. So but yeah, it's a lot to think about. I mean, it's like you paint one really great painting, and you're like, go ahead, paint 40, and make them all different. Make them interesting, not something formulaic. So that it takes a lot out of you, but it's a fantastic challenge. It really is.
Well, I've never painted one, so I got to start there first. But I can imagine once you get one, that then But the first one's the hardest, so you're definitely got the hard part behind you. So you said you started the next painting today.
Mm-hmm.
You'd care to tell us a little bit about your process on that? What that's going to kind of look like, from maybe beginning to end? You can kind of walk us through it and tell us, what it really does take.
Right. Well, I've been working on a composition for the last few weeks. I actually started about a month ago. In the story, they are on a boat. The three figures, Dante, Virgil, and Fledulus, are all on a boat that is approaching the city. So the kind of river Styx is kind of winding into the painting. So you kind of see them, their backs are to you, and they're approaching the shore. And even that just kind of like trying to find references for what does a boat look like approaching a shore. You see tons of things from the other perspective. What does the water look like when there's tons of fire in the air? What is the intimidation like? What does the gates of the city of Dis look like? Because what happens in this particular canto is that Dante and Virgil are attempting to approach this gate so they can get through. Normally, Virgil can lead him anywhere, but at this point, the demons are threatening Virgil and saying, Dante can't come in. He's not dead. He's not allowed to pass. Virgil, you can come in, but you're going to have to stay in here with us. And he doesn't want to do that either. So at this point, he looks at least a little bit worried, one of the few times in the story. And he has to call upon an archangel to come down and explode the gates, so they can get through. So 2 years ago, I finished that painting, called the Celestial Messenger. That would be the next one in chronological order. But this one is right before that moment. So I'm trying to approach it, and you kind of have to think about the panels that are after it too, because this painting will be the city of this, next one will be the Celestial Messenger, and then there's a next one where they're having a conversation with a sarcophagus with Farinata. And so behind the cities of this, in the mountains above it there, I'm setting up where the sarcophagus is for the 2 panels from now, where they'll be visiting that. So we're kind of trying to think, ahead of things, like what do things look like? And then what have I painted so far, that this has to be at least, marry well with it, because there's also another panel mixed in there too, with the Erinyes with Medusa and her sisters, on the wall of the cities of this. And it's another confrontation between Dante and Virgil. They're hiding their faces so they don't turn to stone. They're being harassed by her on the wall. So I've painted that. So I'm looking to keep the look consistent, in the skies. There's demons flying, so I have to have demons in the sky that I'm doing. But it's interesting because I'm trying to also keep it so it's not all the same view all the time. Like this one's kind of panned out a little bit more, less. The figures are smaller in this piece. It's more about the landscape. I really wanted something like intimidating, like the fortress at the end of Lord of the Rings. That huge, humongous, intimidating kind of presence. So I've really just kind of tried to amp up that look to things, and look at a lot of old masonry and everything else, trying to come up with the correct kind of look to things, and then asking Dr. Kleinhans about details, like what does it look like, what do the demons look like, what does the water look like, what is what is happening here, was Dante doing this, is Virgil doing this? So but at least I put together an underpainting this morning, and then I have 3 apprentices, but they were helping me today to work up the first layers of color, to start putting some rough color down, not too much detail, but at least get the feeling of it. So I'm really happy with how that turned out so far. I haven't shared it online yet. I'll probably do that in the morning, but at least have half of it right now that I can kind of get the feel about what it's starting to look like. And most of the paintings from that point, I've spent about 5 to 6 weeks on working on them. This one might go a little faster. There's less figures in this one, so it's less layers. There's a little more background stuff, so that might be kind of nice. Get a little break. But it's very, very it's exciting. It's just another feel to kind of include in the story. I'm trying to keep it fresh. I don't want it to be just constantly the same thing.
Yeah, I imagine that's got to be, there's a couple challenges I can think of with doing a project for so long over time. I haven't done anything to this scale, but I've worked on projects that have taken a longer time, or have been, let's say, a bigger project. And one of the things that sort of always frustrated me was how I was improving as the project went along. So by the time I was getting to the end of the project, I was looking at the beginning of the project and just, completely demoralized at how terrible it was. And then also, as you're mentioning, like keeping it consistent over time. So I would imagine also sort of keeping the same energy going throughout, as you're kind of alluding to as well, with that, sort of, the curiosity, you want the interest, you want things to all sort of fit together. You want, to look the same. So, I'd imagine it's kind of like an endurance test in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it certainly is. Especially in the beginning, I was working at a very different schedule in my life. I mean, I turned 51 a couple months ago, so I can't do it like I used to. I used to work until 3 a.m., get up at 6 in the morning, and start all over again. And I was just getting really burned out. So I've kind of had to look at this as more of a marathon than a sprint kind of situation. But also trying to approach it in that same amount of energy all the time. I don't want it to look like, wow, like you said, like the beginning, you're like, wow, there's some compositions that were great, but wow, near the end, they're so much better. I think there have been, different views of things that people have certain favorites in the series so far. I have my own personal favorites, I think, that have come through so far, but at least even finishing the last one, Canto 8, that I just finished, that's been one of my favorite ones so far. And I could say that one I did, 5 years ago now too is also. So I'm happy, and I don't want to lose any quality. That's the tough part of this. Because initially I set apart to do this. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to do this in about 5 years. And it wasn't as easy as I thought, obviously, because it's all self-financed. So, you know, paint, and then also have a career. I support my family with my art. I've been doing this for 30 years, but I have to support my family. I'm the sole breadwinner with that. And so I do a lot of commission work as well. I do my own paintings as well, which I sell. So I had a lot of that going at the same time, and then try to balance this as well in the whole mix. And it became challenging, and I didn't want to just blow through it and make it, okay, I did it, but didn't put the quality into it that I needed to. So I started seeing, after a while, that it was going to take me longer, and that's okay. And it was weird, because when I originally set my goal, I'm like, I'm going to do it in 5 years. Then I come to find out about a couple weeks later that it was 700 years from when Dante finished the Inferno in 2021, and that 5 years was going to end up right on the 700th anniversary. So after a while, in the beginning, I was playing to that, like, oh, I'm going to try to get it done for that. But it became pretty obvious to me that I wasn't going to be able to hit that number and really pull this off the way it needs to be. So I've kind of let it go a little more, and I'm letting it all come together. And I'm definitely going to be pushing it a lot harder this year to get some numbers, trying to get to 20 by the end of the year. But I know I can do it now. I've got a lot of good compositions put together. I'll be probably starting another panel very soon as well. And as I said, I've got some apprentices which help me with some of the early lay-in work for the beginning. So that saves some time, and gets me a little farther, gets a little force multiplier to be able to get something like this off the ground. So it's still going to take a lot, but I think I'm a lot more intelligent about it than when I started, and things are becoming a little more streamlined now.
And I was going to bring this up. You mentioned apprentices. It sounds like you're running a medieval workshop over there, a little Renaissance workshop. How did that all come to be?
Well, I've been teaching for about 20 years now, and I do a lot in studio, and I teach all around the world, different students via video. So it's been really great. And I've had different apprentices over the years help with certain projects. But I met my one lead apprentice about 6 years ago, that she started working with me. She moved here from the Czech Republic and has been living in America for now about the last 8 years or so. But real fantastic. She just had started doing some oil painting. We did some portrait classes, and she was fantastic to work with. Really took direction very well. And I was so surprised at, how well she progressed and how quickly she was working, and asked her to get involved in one commission, I had back in 2019. And then after a while, asked her to continue to stay if she wanted. And she started working with me on some of these Dante panels. And I got another student about 2-3 years ago that I also brought in. Another girl, her name is Claire. The other lady that I'm working with is her name is Marky Bartow. And then my third apprentice is my daughter. So she started working when she was about age 16, 17 or so. And since she left high school, she's also has a desk in my studio as well. So she does a lot of her work, but she helps me with a lot of the landscape elements in the back and stuff like that. She's really helpful. And so we have a great team. Like we do a lot of commission work comes through my studio, even my own work as well. And it's just a real harmonious opportunity, and it also is a great opportunity for me to help them and kind of launch their careers as well. And I've helped them with direction, business, art, business stuff, and even helped them with certain commissions and stuff that they've brought in. And actually, we're going to all exhibit our work together at the end of this year at a gallery here in Pennsylvania at Penn State University. And it'll be a good opportunity for us to all finally get together. But we've got this little network. I have my own 501c3 for the Armusik Academy of Classical Art, and I kind of put it under that umbrella. But we've kind of incubated all of them. They've turned from being early in their careers to now selling their art, exhibiting their art, and I love being able to give them the help that I didn't get when I was starting out. I had to do this all myself, but it's fantastic being able to see them grow. And I love all their accomplishments as much as my own. So we have a really nice studio. It really is a fantastic environment to work in. So very happy about it.
Yeah, that's really amazing, actually. I'm kind of reflecting back on my time studying, and I feel like, obvious disclaimers here, I feel like the piece that was really missing from when I was learning how to draw and had started to learn how to paint was that I didn't have any sort of apprenticeship. I didn't really have any sort of master who sort of took me under their wings and really sort of pushed me in the business direction, if you will. And I really focused, when I was studying, I really focused on learning the skills and learning how to draw. And I probably was foolishly at the time, I had more recently read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. So I was, I had Howard Rourke in my head about, you're just going to power through, you're just going to do this. But really, that's not kind of how the world works. And having a master who takes you under their wing and sort of soft launches you into the career is much more realistic. And I feel like much more viable than everyone becoming their own Howard Rourke. I was not a Howard Rourke, as it turns out. And so even, just hearing that, I think for the average person who's listening may think that there's, I don't know, that the master apprentice system, I think it's, from my perspective, having not experienced that and experienced the opposite, I think the master apprentice system is vastly superior.
Yes, I do too. And that's the way I've run my academy. It's an overall approach, because what's the point in learning all the technical stuff? I find that a lot of that end of things, a lot of, your ateliers, and they tend to teach skill, and that's fantastic. And they're very good at doing that, but you're kind of teaching half the problem. And the sad thing is you're going to go out into the real world and you're going to get beat by somebody that's got half your talent, because they want to spend the time putting in the marketing work, the promotional work, the investigating about new technologies and how to move things out there and how to get the word out. And it's always going to be true like that. You've got to be, a two-sided person, 50% art, 50% business. And I've been living that. I know what it's like I have a single income in my house. I've been doing this professionally for 30 years, but I ended up starting my business and then working full time for years. And I would come home and I would work all night, and I would stay up till like 2, go to bed, get up at 6, go back to work. So I had both businesses going, and then I dropped off my work, my job. And about 20 years ago, I spent about 10 years in working for somebody else while I was building my business. But for 20 years, I supported my house. And, you have to think about it every day like a business. And that's the challenge. That's the fun of it. You can be creative in it while you're doing it. You can have fun while you're doing it. And you have to think of it that way because it's necessary. But sadly, a lot of universities completely drop the ball. I mean, they don't tell you anything. They don't prepare you at all. And that was my experience. They pretty much left you at the curb, and they're like, what do you want us to do? We gave you a piece of paper, and that doesn't do anything. You have to go out there and become somebody more. And the deeper you get into this profession, and doing grandiose things like I'm trying to do, you have to become more than you are. Even you got to become almost like a movie director to be able to conceive of an idea like this. It's so much bigger than me. That's why I brought in Professor Kleinhans to help me, guide me through this, because I'm like, this is way out of my league. I have such respect for it. I want to do it right. But wow, even the scope of it, it's insane. Just like, how do you create all of that stuff? How do you act it out? What does it look like? What are these people? What are they feeling? What are they like? I want them to have emotions in the story. I want you to look in their eyes and know that there's something going on. And you get artists like Gustave Doré, which did fantastic illustrations of it, but they're small illustrations. You can't really get the facial expressions and things like that, which is what I wanted to capture. I wanted, Caravaggio, Bouguereau, like great, intense, figurative pieces. It's just, yeah. If you thought of that, those great people, like what would they have done if they had the chance to do all of them? I know Bouguereau did, one panel of one, but that kind of thing, I thought that has to be done, and I'm still in all of it. Even at this point, it's got so much more to go. So.
And so that kind of leads into what I was going to ask you next is, what historical artists or artists who do historical paintings, or I guess, maybe even just artists generally, inspire you?
Well, Caravaggio has always been at the top. From the very first art history class I had, I didn't pick up painting until I was 20 years old. I drew all my life, didn't have any direction, didn't have any training or anything like that. But I went away to college. My first art history class, I think I saw the Calling of St. Matthew or something like that from Caravaggio, and I was just hooked. I was like, this is the kind of work I'd love to do. And took my first painting class, and it just knocked me out. And when I got to spend a semester over there, I was able to study 12 of his pieces at great length, and it just changed my life. Just fantastic work. Also, Artemisia Gentileschi, another Italian, a little bit later, very much in the vein of Caravaggio's work. She was absolutely amazing. Love her work. Love the drama and the action of all of it. I love artists like Leon Bonnat. I love Waterhouse. I love Bouguereau's work, obviously. Just absolutely next level kind of portraiture and figurative work. A lot of Rembrandt's work. I tend to like most of those artists, in the 1600s, and then some of the French Academy stuff, Leon Bonnat, and other great artists like that. I love the themes. The themes I paint are things that would have been painted 400 years ago: religion, mythology, history. Those are the kind of paintings I want to paint. I want to paint larger than life stuff. You think about the experiences you had as a kid that lead you up to it. I mean, I was always into epic kind of, films like Ben-Hur and the 10 Commandments and all those huge epic kind of things. And I guess that's kind of what led into this, is that I wanted to take on something that would be seemingly impossible. It's still impossible to me right now, like how it's going to happen, but it's like something that deep, is going to change you and make you a better person. Maybe make you reflect even just the story you're dealing with. Like I've laughed many times is that just like Dante was led by Virgil in the beginning of the story, I met, Dr. Kleinhans, and he became, for me, my Virgil, where he's kind of leading me through all of this. Because I have a cursory understanding of it. I'm reading words and trying to contextualize everything, but trying to see it through the eyes of somebody from the 1300s, very different, very, very eye-opening. So it's an integral piece. And I think between the two of us, I'm going to exhibit these works, but we're going to collaborate on a book together as well. Possibly two different kinds of books, one more educational, because he's done a lot of educational publications that he's done, but I want to do something more on the lines of a really great art book, lots of visuals, and a great, narrative behind it. I think that would be next level kind of stuff. So it should be a fantastic opportunity. So
I can totally see an art book out of this.
yeah,
Sort of where even if you, I hope now you're taking sort of pictures of the process and stuff, because
yeah,
I can totally see something like that, like the format of like a Richard Schmid landscape book where you go
exactly.
through and you just have sort of the process of things like that. I can totally see it.
Definitely, definitely. I think it'd be really great too, because there's even some sketches here and there. There's even just the little stories of how some of the characters came to be. I mean, the one story I painted, I think is it Canto 5 or 6 with Plutus, um, talking about greed at that point. But the model for that, a guy down the street was like cleaning a house of one of my neighbors that passed away. And this dude came down, his long beard, and I was like, wow, he's got such a wild look. I'm like, would you come and pose in my studio? I mean, he just looked at me like I had three heads, but he did it. It was nice that he did, and got this great shot of reference photo of him, and kind of build a composition by there. But there's so many like little stories about how these things came to be, and it'll be really fun to kind of put that in one place and be able to share it, because it's stretching a lot of my life at this point. I mean, we're going on almost 8 to 9 years at this point in the story, so definitely changing as I get older, and lots to share. But there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, so it'll be fun.
So do you have the other 24 images already locked in? Like, you know basically what they're going to be?
Right. Yeah, I do have a lot of them put together. There's some that I brought some models. I'll hire a lot of figurative models here, and I was even telling my apprentices today. There's some shots I took of models from like 2018. That I'm like, okay, she's going to be in, Canto 4, and then later on in Canto 20. I try to rack these things up while they're here, and then in between kind of leave the blank open and saying, all right, I need to find a model that somebody looks like this and somebody looks like that. And for me, it could be somebody I hire. It could be, the kids stocking shelves at the local Weiss market down the street for me. I mean, whoever it ends up being is sometimes I leave it up to at least a little bit of spontaneity, to keep it fun. But there is at least sketches for a lot of these things. I try to meet with Dr. Kleinhans to at least talk to him in depth about like 4 to 5 of these when I'm planning them, the cantos together, so that I can get some really good reference together and start brainstorming and stuff. But it's helpful, at least with him, that he can tell me, am I heading in the right direction, when I'm just dealing with a pencil sketch in the beginning, and then I'll go a little deeper and start working with the right people and stuff like that. So he's kind of keeping me on track in a good way, so I'm not veering off into some tangent. So that's really very helpful.
So how do you, when you're looking at this, how do you interpret then, between sort of like maybe a strict interpretation of something and then, the artistic license between something, if that makes sense, what I'm asking?
No, it definitely does, because there's sometimes, like, I think even when he was talking to me about the panel I'm doing now, he was like, I don't know if we need the big structures and things like that in there, but I'm trying to convey, reading it to me, and I'm thinking of like, how do you convey like a very intimidating thing in the distance unless it's something looking very intimidating? There's also another, I think one of the cantos coming up in the 20s, I think, is like the wood of the suicides, so people that have committed suicide, I believe, are kind of cast into these humanistic trees, and I know Gustave Doré drew those that way, which makes a lot of sense. You're trying to convey that these people are turned into trees. But he was telling me it's not quite as literal as that. Like they would just be trees, and there's animals running through and breaking branches off and stuff. And I'm like, in order to get the empathy from the audience, being able to know that these trees are humanistic makes more sense. You're trying to get some empathy from your audience, and so those kinds of artistic license things, like I see the points of certain things of trying to really hit it on the head, because obviously too, not everybody reads this anymore. Like even in my time, I read this because I wanted to. It wasn't part of an assignment. So you're approaching a whole new audience 700 years later that's never seen, or heard any of this, and you got to give them a real kind of, again, a cursory understanding of what it is. And uh, just like they did in the church, many years ago when people were illiterate, being able to give them good visuals can be a really good roadmap to getting them there, and kind of encourage that reading. So it's kind of part of my intention with this as well, is to really do it strict to, as best as I can, strict to what the artist's intention was in the 1300s, so that this work can be used if they do a college book or a high school book on it. The kids can look at that, what's on an image in there, and say, oh, that's in line with what the text is saying, or maybe it's helping me understand the text better because there's something being acted out there. So that's the crux of it. If it was just me, wanting to get this done, geez, we can just start without any kind of guidance on this and just knock it out. And people have done crazy renditions of this that are just quite off the wall sometimes. But I didn't want to do that. I love history, love culture, I love the respect I have for the Dante's original creation. It deserves my time. He took 20 years to write this. If it takes me 20 years to get it right, that's completely understandable. So
I've been getting back into medieval history, and I've obviously ran my account now online for almost a year, and I've only come across 3 artists, I think, who are doing any sort of historical artwork
right.
consistently, like as like a big project, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is Jay Holt, who does some of the Greek stuff, and then Sam McIntyre, who just released a big painting of Tour. I saw his work, and then your work. When I'm thinking about and looking through a lot of illustrations and pictures and stuff, it seems like, in particular, 100 years ago, but then, of course, during the Renaissance, there was a lot more of an emphasis on historical artwork. And it seems like that emphasis has fallen off in modernity.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think you just used the big M word. Is modernity has changed our respect of the past. As I said, for me to do what I'm doing right now, I'm staying on the shoulders of great people. And I think just the same way we revere our ancestors, there's less and less of that anymore being taught, especially in the schools on a historical level and an art historical level. It's taught that with the rise of modern art, your Clement Greenberg types and everything, telling everybody that anything beautiful is kitsch and fake and nonsense, and this really intellectual thing over here that is crazy and doesn't take much talent to do. We're going to tell you with some text how great it is and how stupid you are if you don't understand it. And that played out. And it played out to its most ridiculous states in minimalism and conceptualism. So, here I was entering into this profession, into college in the early 90s. And they're basically telling me painting's dead. Painting's dead. Don't even do it. Don't do anything like that. Don't even think of doing anything traditional, but don't do any painting. And I didn't believe that. I thought, you got to be kidding me. Like I had a reverence for history from the time I was born. My parents were really history buffs. I would go visit Revolutionary War sites and Civil War sites as a kid. So I always had a curiosity. I didn't have an understanding of art history, but I loved history. I loved learning about history, and I still do. I really, I spend a lot of my time, even when I'm painting. We were talking earlier about, I'm listening to the History of Byzantium with Robin Peterson. for the last couple months. And before that, I was listening to History of Rome podcast for 200 episodes there. Like, and then, spending the time and living there in Italy and really seeing how history plays a part in people's lives in Europe. And I look at it here and I'm like, I don't see anything in my world around me, anything art wise or anything that inspires me to want to paint that. Like there's just, how did we go through, hundreds and hundreds of years, millennia of doing stories about Alexander the Great, of, Julius Caesar, or, any of the great empires, painting paintings of Jesus Christ and, the biblical stories. How did we do that for thousands of years now? And then all of a sudden, somewhere in the 20th century, you're like, no, we're done. We're not doing any of that anymore. Like, it's a hoax. It's ridiculous. And it came to its inevitable end. And then postmodernism comes out and it's even just as goofy. But I think people like living in the world we are in today, I mean, we can see how it's played out. This crazy world we're living in now, I was living in my art classes 30 plus years ago. This is meaningless. The world is meaningless right now. And we've been told it's meaningless. We're told there's no meaning to anything. Well, how can that be true? How did we get all this greatness around us and the monuments of the past? So I don't do it just as a response to that, but I guess inadvertently I'm a response to that by choosing to do what I do. And I love doing what I do. And, I paint a lot of religious work. I'm a very devout Catholic myself all my life. I love mythological work. I've always loved that from the time I was a kid. I love his history, and I don't think there's anything more interesting to paint, or draw or do anything else. And I don't feel like I will ever run out of content. Like there's just too much to do. Like I have this Dante series in front of me, but the list of things I want to paint are ridiculous. Like I don't know if I'll ever run out, and I'm grateful and blessed to feel that way, but that's what true happiness is. Like I feel tapped in. I love what I do. I just want to do more of it. I want to do it bigger. I mean, I want to do 40-foot paintings like I saw in Venice, I want to do crazy stuff because I'm like, I haven't unleashed the extent of what I think I can do. Like I hope before I die, I can do that. Like I can get all of that out. That's the biggest fear, is not being able to get all that out.
So that brings up a great point, because I think often about the Slav epics by Mucha.
Oh yeah.
I've never seen them in person, but I've seen the pictures of them, how they're just 20 or 30 feet tall and 40 or 50 feet wide or whatever it is. They're huge.
Yeah.
And obviously I think you did 20 of them. Is that right?
Yeah, it's something like that. I just missed it. In 2019, I was in the Czech Republic and I could have seen it. And I just didn't have the time at the time. I'm still kicking myself. Next time I go back, for sure, I'm taking my daughter there as well to see them, because they just look immense. I mean, so incredible. But yeah, he totally created something absolutely amazing.
And I was just thinking the other day, how is it that the Czech Republic has a 20-piece series of national epics? And no disrespect to the Czech Republic, but many bigger, wealthier countries don't have giant epic paintings series of their history and stuff like that. How is that?
Yeah, that really amazes me. That they were able to pull that together and even look at our own. What we're not looking at. There's so much to be told, and again, not understanding history. Again, we continue to falter and make the same mistakes over and over and over again. The great lessons are in history, and I think that they don't make it interesting, I guess, to some people, or even teach what would be interesting anymore. It saddens me, because I don't think there's really anything more great than that, is understanding the context to everything, the origins of everything you see. Like everything didn't just happen in the 20th century, like modernism would have you believe, that somehow, like, oh, they figured it out, they killed religion, they, destroyed, order in society and everything else, and, brought everything down to its simplest form, and we're all supposed to feel great about it. But there's a disharmony in the world that's been here for at least 100 plus years, and it needs to come back. There need to be artists and architects and musicians that continue to bring back those standards and culture and that grandiose idea of what it's like to be an artist anymore. What it's like to be an artist anymore is just, in a lot of interpretations, is just stupid. There's no, it's just a bunch of flailing stuff that doesn't have any meaning. But the things that I'm doing and other artists that decide to take on these things integrally connect into the past. You can look at, I like my work. I could look at it in context with, hundreds of years ago, other interpretations, things, from 100 years after Dante wrote it to, 50 years ago, whatever. There's a connection that's had, and it doesn't make any less important that it's been done a bunch of times. It makes it more interesting that, there's more meaning there to share. We've been painting a lot of the same subjects over and over again, but that the feelings behind it, there's real emotions, real human, experience behind all those things. That for me is like living and breathing. You want to leave something there that's so important that people have to ask questions about it. And I would rather people either love my work or absolutely hate it than not pay attention to it. The worst thing in the world that anybody can do is to walk by and not even see it. I'm not doing my job if that's the case. You can hate it, whatever. It's at least an emotion that you've taken the time to look at it. But if I ever didn't do my job, and didn't create something that could connect with people, that would be a failure. And I think that that's the standards I think we all have to hold ourselves to now as an artist. I mean, we only have a certain amount of time on this earth. What are you leaving behind?
One thing that I did want to ask you about that is you had mentioned that you do want to do a 40-foot epic painting or something like that.
Right.
What's the logistics that goes into something like that? Because I'm familiar with what goes into maybe a 4-foot or 5-foot painting, but I don't know if you're familiar at all, if you've explored it, but what goes into that, a 40-foot painting?
You know what? I would love the opportunity to do it. My studio, unfortunately, isn't big enough for that. I've got about 30 feet I could play with, by about 20 feet higher. So, but I guess it's that desire to want to go and create something more immense and get an idea. Like when you see some of these incredible paintings, like done by the French academies, of like, Nero visiting the floor of the Colosseum and stuff after, one of the gladiatorial battles or something like that, or some of these immense, heavenly scenes and stuff, or the fall of the damned or something like that in a church, these incredible, like, just compositions that you can see from 100 feet away and it just blows your mind. Like that kind of level is what I want to play with. And just being able to, put that kind of composition together, the amount of people involved, trying to pose all those people and try to create a composition that's cohesive and all that, like that to me seems like so over the top. But the challenge is worth it, and it's so great. Like even just a singular going through and maybe posing a single body at a time or a couple bodies at a time. And, if you've ever worked with people like that, when you're trying to come up with an idea and trying to have them act it out, and you're kind of leaving 25% up to chance to see what looks natural with them. So you're not doing something that looks stiff and ridiculous. You can kind of see that organically kind of come together sometimes, with just the experiences of, lay like that or do that face or, have this emotion and, try that from another angle. And, you kind of see these things kind of like a web from a spider, kind of pulling it all together and coming together. That to me sounds like absolutely like blissful work. And I'm a kind of artist that wouldn't, take years to do it either. I love working, at a pretty good pace and trying to get things done. So I would love to just, do one in a short amount of time and see the reaction to it and put it all together and leave something for history. That's kind of where I'm at this point, is trying to do everything I can and leaving it for, the benefit of my family that has supported me all these years. And let them benefit from it far after I'm gone.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you're a full-time working artist and I am not, so you probably have a much more informed opinion than I do, even though I may have a strong opinion about this.
Mhm.
And I may have voiced a strong opinion about this many times. So maybe you can correct me or guide me in a proper direction. You made mention at the very beginning when we first started talking, like when you were first starting your career and you were saying something about, like, I want to get one of these huge commissions. I want these huge commissions to come out. And when we look back, let's say more than 100 years ago, it's pretty common for artists to be commissioned to do this kind of work. It was pretty standard. You mentioned, I pronounce it Bouguereau. You said Bouguereau. We could fight about that one later. But, or any of these, whoever it is, Waterhouse, Alma-Tadema, Jerome, you go all the way back, whatever, Caravaggio, Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo, all of them. They were all commissioned to do these various historical, epic storytelling artworks. And that, we've talked a little bit about how that's gone away today. But it seems to me like, in general, when I read about the Renaissance, for example, or learn about the Renaissance, okay, you got these patrons of the arts. This guy wants to pay for the thing. This guy's building a palace. This guy's commissioning the mural. The Pope is doing this, commissioning these artworks, these other types of things. And then I look at what's going on today, and Jeff Bezos is building a clock in the ground, and I guess, and I don't know. They're doing goofy stuff. They're just sort of all these guys with more money than you can ever imagine are just doing goofy things. Warren Buffett is writing shareholder letters about how he didn't want to found a dynasty, and he wants his kids to give all of his money to NGOs. Like, what, maybe am I like, let me think of the way to put this. Cause I don't want, I don't want you to necessarily make a specific comment about yourself in this. But like, am I off? Like, are the people that have money today, like, what's going on with these guys? What's happening here?
I think in a lot of ways, there used to be more of a charity involved in the past, where people would look to legacies and things like that, but also, again, with a respect for history, with a respect for ancestry, culture, patriotism, things that the modern world has kind of destroyed. I think when you try to compare somebody, and there's good and bad to say about somebody like an Andrew Carnegie, but, in his life, not the greatest guy, but then leaves a great legacy with all the libraries in the world. We have one of them here in my town, even. Great stuff, a little more cultural. But I think in the past, there was a lot more of that desire to want to continue that culture because it was important. I've said it many times about the disharmony in the modern world. There's a disharmony. There's, music is in an off frequency. The air we breathe is different. The outlook in schools and what it means to be classically educated and everything else. These things are all thrown away. Religion is unimportant. There's a narcissism to the world, and I think when people acquire fortunes and things like that, whereas in the past they would dedicate a great cultural center with maybe a beautiful opera house and murals and everything in there, and want that to live for the benefit of the, say, whatever the culture's people. Now it's just outright narcissism. It's just what kind of stupid nonsense can I create that people remember me, and that's it. It's all about me. And I myself, I don't particularly see that very often, but there's a certain narcissism that's going on, and I think people used to have more concern about what you're leaving behind to help others, and I think that's more of a classical societal thing. And I think today, with the modern world, I just don't think that they have that intention anymore. And in my personal experience, I can say that, at least on the religious side, I still see that old classical model. People, a parish will commission me to do work, but a lot of times it'll be sponsored by somebody who passed on in the parish that wanted something, or people in the parish that collectively come together and say, yeah, we want a new altarpiece painted. We have this old church that we want to, beatify so it lives along another 50, 60, 100 years, whatever. So I've personally seen that model, turn the wheel, or turn, many decades ago. And sometimes I'm seeing, some of the other stuff kind of coming back. There's a little bit of a resurgence. There's definitely a lot more artists like yourself that are in this, representational art, realism, classical art than when I was starting. So there's definitely a rebirth. I don't remember there being nearly any ateliers or academies when I was in college. It was very, very scant. So there is, I think, with the new generations, it tends to be turning around at least. And I could definitely say that at least in the Catholic, the world with the priests, the younger guys tend to be way more traditional than the older ones. So they want to get rid of all the modern stuff and, create things that are going to last, stand the test of time. And they're thinking about other people. So I think that's the difference of it. There is definitely, I think that the modern model has played itself out to at least the point where I think people are searching and dying, especially in the last 5 years or so with all the craziness we've gone through. I think more people are looking back to the past and going, what are we missing? Why were we blowing up all these buildings that were built, in the early 1900s, and then putting up parking lots or, these empty, disgusting, brutalist architecture buildings, and that mean nothing, and then you see other countries like Hungary that are building old structures again, revitalizing old, classical architecture and, sponsoring that kind of thing. I think it makes a better society. It raises our standards, raises our vibration, I think, as a society, as a cultural. And I think the job of the artist is the most important, thing we see throughout history. I mean, we help, chronicle history in that respect. It was literally our job to do that, from the very beginning, from cave paintings and, in France. I mean, you're chronicling all of history. So I think that's hopefully something that will change. And I think I'd like to believe maybe in my lifetime I leave at least a little bit of things behind there that contribute to that.
All right. And so you're now started on your the next painting is the ninth canto. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think I'm going to call it the eighth, because I said this is one of those where the eighth canto kind of enters into the scene I'm doing, and the ninth is actually at the city of Dis. So it's kind of a choose which one, but I think I'm going to go back and call it the eighth.
All right.
What's going on.
And for anybody that wants to follow along, Eric's website and his X account will be in the description. You can follow him along there in the paintings and see how the project is coming along. And I will leave you, sir, with the last word. If you have anything else you'd like to say on Dante, on your project, or on historical art, whatever you'd like.
Great. I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity. I'm really happy we could have this conversation. It was really awesome. And if anybody's interested in finding out more about my work, you can go to ericarmusik.com. It's ERICARMUSIK.com. You can see links in there to my Dante project. Again, it is self funded at this point. So I have a number of ways that people can help contribute to it, from prints to Patreon links to a number of other contributional things. And I thank you for your support and all of your attention. And I hope you'll take a look at it and tell me what you think.